Well, welcome back to Leading Big in Small Places, panel number 4, Administration. I'm Shannon White with the Library of Michigan, and I have Kristen Fonicero with me with the University of Michigan. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen for a moment here.
Hi, guys. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to answer a question that I've been getting in email all morning about the certificates. If you need to do your own certificate, you can do it in 2 ways. You can click on the link in the event document and go to the certificate and print it out and write your name in. Or if you want to have it typed in, make a copy of the document. Go to File, Make a Copy, and that will give you your own document, and then you can type it in. So I hope that clears things up. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Shannon.
You're welcome. Okay, so we have 3 presenters to conclude the event today. Just want to note that the last one, our presenter is unable to join us this morning, but the first 3 are ready and set to begin. So the first presenter we have with us this morning is Amber Hughey from Bridgeport Public Library.
Hello, hello. So my presentation is on your library's physical plant. Keep it fresh, keep it updated. For a bit of information, I'm in a class 4 public library with just over 12,000 people. We were established in the early 1980s, which makes us a pretty young library. This building I'm in was built in the early 90s with one small addition added on in 2009. And I'm lucky to be just the 2nd director. So I've got some big shoes to fill. And next slide, please. So the big picture. So you want to look at a few different things. How does your library appear to the public? How accessible is your library and the collection? And then what is your end goal? Do you want easier access, smaller or larger collection? Do you need to add special collections? Do you want more patrons? Everybody wants more patrons, let's be honest. Or do you want happier patrons? Again, we all want happier patrons. So with that in mind, how can we switch it up to improve 1 and 2 and keep number 3 in mind? Next slide, please. So we start out with looking at the public, what they see and what they want. So first impressions are very important. When you take a walk around your library, inside and out, look at it from a first-time patron's perspective. How welcoming is your outdoor space? What parts of your collection or library is easy to find? What is difficult or nearly impossible to find? Is your layout confusing? Is it cluttered or hard to navigate? Are your shelves too close? Do you have a bunch of spinner racks? I hate spinner racks. And how welcoming is the atmosphere? So when I came into Bridgeport 3 years ago, my first impression was a really unkempt library. The outside garden, which you'll see pictures of in a little bit, was horribly unkempt. And upon entry to the library, this picture was full of spinning racks and the chest-high shelves just packed with materials. It was cluttered and just unfriendly. The staff, however, were extremely friendly. We are known locally as the friendliest library around. Next slide, please. So after you've looked at your library from the public perspective, look at it from the staff perspective. This is your second impression. Take a walk around your library and look at it from your staff's perspective. Is the collection too spread out? Are separate collections too easily mingled? Is your library cluttered? Are you hoarding things just in case? Do you have 5 computer monitors sitting in the back for no reason? Do you have tubs of cords that you just have no idea what they're for? And look at the staff area as well for these reasons. Cluttered, hoarding. Is there an appropriate enough workspace? Do you have boxes on boxes, or do you have unused or outdated equipment? I'm sorry, if you've got 10 monitors sitting in back on a shelf, you probably do not need them. It's time to get rid of them. Now, I do this on a regular basis. I'm constantly walking around the library thinking about what I can do to improve it. I talk with my staff the entire time to think about what needs improved, updated, or removed. It helps that I have a staff member who loves removing as much as I do. Next slide, please. So this is a big project, but it doesn't have to be big. So you want to start small. Choose one thing to improve right away, such as a cluttered collection. Can you read your medical books? because everybody knows that outdated medical books are not good to have. Do you have a hard to navigate area where you can just remove spinner racks? Is it unwelcoming? Is your layout confusing or overwhelming? Or, as before, do you have unused technology sitting in the back that you can just recycle? If you're still overwhelmed, start very small. Weed a small area to make more room. Clear some cupboards, and talk to your staff. Your staff know what needs to be done, even if they don't want to do it. Next slide, please. The patrons. Patrons see everything. If you have holes in your carpet, they see it. If they see your tile floors looking, grimy and gross, they see it. They see that there are missing blinds. They see that your computers are not working as they should be. I know I've gotten many complaints about how slow our computers are. And in the case of technology, consider creating a technology improvement plan that you can then add into your budget. Do you need to replace 2 computers every 2 years? This can really help. Just keep your library updated. They don't have to be expensive fixes, but these things do need fixed on a regular basis. Next slide, please. Now, some things to consider with your overall condition. Do you have a cluttered collection? Weed everything. And I believe the presenter after me is going to tell you just how you can go about that, how you can weed your collection. But one thing to keep in mind, it's better to have nothing than outdated misinformation. No 20-year-old medical books, no 20-year-old law books, weed them. Is your library confusing? So do you have signage? Do you need more signage, or do you have too much signage? As a librarian, you've likely thought that we need a sign for that, and then promptly made one. The issue with that is that libraries generally have an overabundance of signs, leading the signs to be visual white noise that every patron is going to ignore. With too many signs, it's very easy for patrons to overlook the important ones. Take a look at your front doors. If you've got 6 letter-sized signs, that's too much. Pare them down. And on the cluttered collection, weed on a constant but slow basis. Choose one collection that you know you can weed and weed it a month with a goal of removing roughly 5% of the books. I do confess I had a mass weed right after I came to Bridgeport, and I removed over 6,000 books. We had cluttered collections, we had shelves that were packed, and we had books that had not been checked out in 20 years. A nice goal to have is at the end of every shelf, so it doesn't appear cluttered and it's easier to navigate, is roughly 1 hand span on the end of a shelf. Now, is your library unwelcoming? Is it cluttered on entry? And if so, can you shift collections after weeding to remove some unnecessary shelving, such as these spinner racks? This picture is a picture of an old library I worked at, and this was our lobby. Every one of those shelves was full. One thing that we did was we emptied out that lobby, and it became much more welcoming, much more bright, and patrons liked coming in a little bit more. Something I've done at my current library is our collections were separated. So our adult fiction was on one side of the library, and adult nonfiction was on the other side. So after I did my mass weed, we were able to condense the collections and keep them in the same area for easier browsing. And since we created all that room, we were able to improve our teen area, which started with as a 10 by 10, very cluttered, narrow space, into half of what was our former adult fiction area, which is roughly 20 by 30. And now our teens have room to grow, and we are getting upwards of 10 teens a day, whereas before we would only get a couple because we didn't have the room. Next slide, please. So new trends and needs. Finding space. Other than library books, what can your library offer that they don't? What can be reduced to make more rooms? So consider this. Computer use is likely slowing at your libraries too, as people access more information on their phones, on laptops, versus using the library computers. Can you reduce the amount of computers? Can you reduce the amount of physical magazines? As you can see from my magazine picture here, we have many empty spaces. We're going to be condensing this and creating a nice little seating area. And the box in the corner is a geocache, just in case you're wondering. We host one of those. So do you want to add a maker space? Do you want to add libraries of things, charging stations, outdoor spaces? Consider what your library needs to add and what you can do to make that room. Next slide, please. Now, after looking and fixing up your indoors, don't forget the outdoors. When you drive into your parking lot, what is your first impression? Is it the picture on the left, which was what it was when I came to Bridgeport? This is a March picture, and by summer, everything was grown. It was waist-high weeds with a few flowers. So are you utilizing it, or are you just mowing it? Well, we removed that very overgrown garden and hired a landscaping company, and they sodded down most of it. But we still have our flowers on the edge for a nice appearance. We're adding outdoor seating areas for story times and for patrons. So instead of having all this just green grass, we're using it. I know a lot of libraries are adding story walks. They're adding children's gardens. Just consider what you can do to improve the outdoor space as well. Next slide, please. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're not going to finish this all in a few months, and I'll be surprised if you have it done in the first decade. Write lists of what you want to see done and what you've done. Your board is going to want to know. They're going to want to keep track of everything that you've done to improve the library. It is a really good selling point for yourself and for your library into the community. Involve your staff, because your staff is as invested as you are. And lastly, weeding can be fun. Don't be afraid to weed. I know it's hard to get rid of your darlings, but if they're not going out, no sense in keeping them. Replace them with a new one. Next slide, please. So I use the Crew weeding manual to weed my books. And for signage, this is an interesting article I found written on library signage specifically. So when these are sent out in 72 hours, I would definitely recommend you read these and then look at your library. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amber. So we have our chat moderator gathering questions, and we'll go through questions at the end. So now we are on to our second presenter for this last session of panel number 4 administration. It's Carrie Ralston from Walled Lake City Library.
Thanks, Shannon. So if you want to just move to the next slide, we'll get my title one up there. So I'm Carrie Ralston. I'm from the Walled Lake City Library. We are located in the Metro Detroit area. Our population is roughly 7,000, and the city itself is about 5 square miles. We are surrounded by very larger communities. So again, we kind of hide in between them, if you will. So in playing off what Amber has talked about, I am a weeder. I love to weed. I love to get rid of things and just clean stuff up. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about this. Next slide, please. There's an uncomfortable truth about library stacks that most librarians know, but many don't like to admit. Those shelves hold a lot of junk that has to make way. So that quote is from the Library Journal article, The Art of Weeding, and I did link to it on my resource page. So I recommend giving it a quick look through. I find this to be a very accurate quote. We as librarians like to collect things. We're just a bunch of collectors, and not just books, but I mean, that box of cords in the back, yeah, I've got like 4. So again, we're collectors, but we should be curators, not really hoarders. Next slide, please. So I want you to imagine your ideal library. What does it look like? Is it big and open and airy? Is it floor to ceiling shelves? Is it packed full of books? You know, are those shelves full, half full? You know, are there so many things you just can't keep adding? And unfortunately, we can't do that. So we need to see the library as a whole and not just sections of it. Next slide, please. Empty versus clutter-free. I like to think about trying to be clutter-free. When I come in and I look at my shelves, I know there are some people who would walk in and be like, these shelves are empty. Where is everything? I've actually had people tell me that. However, I also hear the complete opposite where it's so great. I can find all this stuff and you have all the best stuff and things like that. So to me, being clutter-free, again, I call it clutter-free, just kind of showcases what we have, and it makes people see the books rather than just the paper, you know, the whole forest for the trees. Next slide, please. So let's work towards sparking joy in the stacks. Next slide. So just a couple quick little things about weeding or deselection, collection maintenance, whatever you want to call it. So in the long run, it will save you time. It takes a lot of work to get a collection into shape, but once it's done, it will be so much easier to work with. It can be very emotional. I buy things that I think sound amazing and I think will go out constantly, and then they don't. And it's very hard to get rid of something that you really liked and had high hopes for. So yes, it is emotional. People get very attached to their items. So data can be your friend. The numbers don't lie. You know, if I buy 600 books a year, I have to get rid of just as many because I don't have space on my shelves. I use reports. I check my numbers before doing any kind of maintenance. And for me, the numbers take a lot of the emotion out of it. If I have books that have been sitting on the shelf for 5 years, why are they still sitting there? Clearly, I have not had a demand for them like I wanted. But if I see it on paper, it makes it a little less emotional, I find. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. I have weeded things I probably shouldn't have. And your patrons will tell you very much when that happens. It's not the end of the world, and it can be hard to sometimes find a replacement if something happens like that, like you pull the wrong local history book. It's kind of challenging in that way, but don't be afraid to make the mistakes and pull things. And finally, and I know not everyone can do this, but I try to keep it out of the public view. So again, keeping things private. I was very lucky during COVID, we were closed, and that's when I did a big one. And if I'm out front, I just get a small cart. And if patrons ask, I'm like, oh, you know, it's just maintenance. I try not to let them see that I'm doing things like pulling labels or anything like that. I just, oh, it's maintenance. I'm checking, you know, some items, make sure they're in good condition, things like that. Most people are generally happy with that. Patrons who come in, they're generally happy with that answer. Next slide, please. This was just fun. Weeding can be fun, I promise. Maybe it's not as fun as this, you know, tossing those medical books into a basket, but it's still pretty fun. Next slide, please. So here's just a couple little tricks that I've found that will help spark joy. Easy things to get rid of. First one, duplicates. Duplicates don't spark joy. Who needs 4 copies of a James Patterson from 2 years ago? I don't think anyone does. Pretty sure we don't need 4 copies of one that was published 3 months ago, but that could just be me. Condition matters. I have found so many that are so beat up and coffee stained and just pages falling apart. Like, who's gonna want that? That's, I feel, again, easy one to get rid of. Oh, dumb, terrible books. Do you really need pole dancing to gospel hymns? It is a real book, by the way. So it's probably not what it sounds like. It's a short story book. So, but still pretty interesting title. And then again, back to the numbers. It really does come down to the data. You know, going back a couple slides, where are you going to put room for, you know, 30 new books a month if you don't have the space? So next slide, please. So here's a few things that you can do to kind of get started and get to thinking about it. Be prepared with a plan. So make a plan, stick to it. It can be a yearly plan, weekly plan, daily plan. I know I personally will walk through the shelves, and if I see something, I'll just pull it right then, just to kind of check it. Like if I see something that's really old and beat up looking, excuse me. So be prepared to get dirty. A big weeding project is a lot of dust and dirt and grime, and it's not very fun, but it will be worth it in the end. And then be prepared for the pushback. That is something we've all seen. We've all seen how patrons have called out their libraries for, you know, a dumpster full of books. But it's not just from the patrons. Your staff will give you pushback too. Generally, the people who are not fond of weeding, they like to keep their things, and you know, they may refuse to weed. And it's a hard position to be in, but it is a part of the job. You know, it has to be done even if I'm the one doing it. So next slide, please. So this is just like a little quick chart of our how many items we have in our circs and things like that. So in October of 2019, we had just over 28,000 items in our collection, physical items. And then at the end of October of this year, we had 22,000. You know, that's a deselection of at least of almost 6,000 books. But if you also think about it, I probably did closer to 7 just because of the replacing with the new items. And the second chart is our circulations, the yellow. So 2020 is the middle. Everyone had terrible time in 2020. So, but I still put it in there. Even just looking at the jump from October of 2019 to the end of October of this year, it was very significant. I personally feel like it goes back to the whole, you know, we're collecting and curating what our patrons want rather than just having packed shelves. So getting rid of items did not affect our circulation. I know it's a case of correlation does not equal causation, but I find it pretty interesting to see. So next slide, please. So in the words of Marie Kondo, we should be choosing what we keep, not what we get rid of. And next slide, please. This is just my resources. The Art of Weeding is that very first article right there. Again, awful library books, always just a fun giggle, and then just a couple other weeding things. And then next slide. So thank you, everyone. I hope it helps someone out there, one person, that would be great. If you need help with some weeding, I will come to your library and weed for you. That's how much I love it. So all you have to do is ask. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carrie. So we have one more presenter for this session. We have Lisa Bell, Director of Sunfield District Library, with us.
Hello, my name is Lisa Bell, and I'm the director of the Sunfield District Library. We're a small library halfway between Lansing and Grand Rapids. And my background is from beginning with bookkeeping, but I became a school librarian a little over 18 years ago. I spent the majority of that time in the elementary school, with my last years at the middle school. I became the director here a little over 3 years ago, and I grew up in this area, so I'm very familiar with the people and the area. Next slide, please. We serve a Class 1 library with just over 2,000 people in our zip code, which, because of that, gives us a very small, modest budget. And we do allow people from other areas to come here, but because they like the small town atmosphere, but that doesn't help our revenue at all. It just helps with not our millage, but other services that we provide. And there's several very active community groups that help support programs of the library. Next slide, please. So do you need to offer everything? Well, we all want to offer as many programs as we can to our patrons, but I've learned that we don't necessarily need to offer everything. We have 3 neighboring libraries that are very similar in size to ours, and through finding out what all they provide, it's made it possible for us to be really selective in the programs that we provide, and it has actually helped our attendance at our programs by being selective and not trying to duplicate what other libraries are doing. So we've learned that we can work to the benefit of each other and surrounding libraries instead of thinking of each other as competitors. Next slide, please. So how do you decide what to offer? Well, learn your area. Not only learn what other libraries are doing in your area, but learn your demographics. You can learn so many things by learning what your specific area needs. So you can get a great resource that I've used with censusreporter.org. And that gives you information on people's age, gender, race and ethnicity, their income, whether they commute to work, home ownership, and so much more. So it's really important to not only study that, but also discover the groups, because the groups in your area are some of the best advocates for our libraries. Next slide, please. I recently received a grant, and I got to admit, the first thing that came to my mind was, what can I do with this? How many things can I buy? What, you want to make the most out of those kind of opportunities, but in looking at it and reflecting on it, trying to do too many things was going to impact the quality. Time is so precious, and trying to do too many things I knew was going to affect the program. It's just me. I'm the only full-time employee here. I have 3 part-time employees that are only here during open library hours, and only one at a time. So it was going to be me doing the research, the purchasing, the preparing, the presentation, and I just knew it wasn't going to be possible to put out quality programs in mass. So next slide, please. So with the pandemic still affecting everybody, I tried to come up with something that would benefit COVID-weary people. And I had read about a big surge of people that were re-engaging nature. So taking that in mind, I tried to come up with something that would help our patrons explore new habits and experiences. And with the uncertainty of times, I wanted it to be something that could be done outside, and we could host an outside program. And so we went with a nature watching and photography type idea. Next slide, please. So we created these kits. Kits come with the carrying case, a tripod, books about picture taking with your smartphones, a book about birds in the local area, and then it also came with a special device that attaches to either monoculars or binoculars, depending on what the person was comfortable with, and it uses the smartphone to take pictures and videos and just for simple viewing. So we had a workshop outside, and we introduced the community to the equipment and had them ask any questions that they needed. We talked about places where they might be able to go view nature in our area. And once the workshop was all done, we encouraged them to check things out, take them home, practice, have fun with them. And one of the best comments we got was from a community member that said, I didn't realize libraries did more than books. And that was perfect. That was exactly what we wanted. We wanted people to realize that libraries do so much more than books. Next slide, please. So we have we continue to be affected by COVID, but so did our local support groups. And one of our local groups pays for our summer reading program, and all of their efforts and events for fundraising had been, stopped, put on hold. They weren't able to do any of those things. And so they weren't able to do the funds, but they came up with some fantastic ideas. And once the other groups in the area realized that they weren't going to be able to pay for the program, 3 different groups came together to come up with some great ideas that would be safe. We would be able to host them outside. They were going to come at no cost, a little cost. And the best part about it was that people were already struggling with all kinds of other social issues, with politics and the pandemic and restrictions and masking. And it was, dividing a lot of people, but the community came together to come up with ideas to help support our library program. So next slide, please. So they came up with really, really good ideas. And if you look at the paid programs, they're good presentations, they're good quality programs, but the costs can be really overwhelming. And so our focus was safety, cost, and they came up with some really good ideas for me. Next slide, please. So the first thing that kicked off our summer reading program was the fire department. And I had no idea that the fire departments already have programs prepared and ready to share with people. It started out with a really adorable little picture book on ferrets and fire safety. And then it turned into a fireman putting on his full gear so that parents and children could experience what they might look like and sound like, because if they enter a home that's filled with smoke, the sound alone can be very scary for children. And then once we explored that, we went to the big trucks and they showed us all the equipment on there. They were so knowledgeable about all of the things that they shared with us. They shared the small rescue trucks of first responders, and we even got a demonstration of the jaws of life, which was really cool. And the fire department provided the entire program. It was a quality program. And they also provided goodie bags and smoke detectors to anybody that was interested. And it was enjoyed by people of all ages. Next slide, please. The next thing was, I didn't know that some colleges and universities have loanable learning kits. And MSU's Museum of Natural Science usually has people that they send out to perform these programs, but because of COVID, in-person presentations were not allowed. But because of the theme, Tails and Tales, we were able to loan and borrow one of their kits. It was called the Michigan Mammals Skull Kit, which the kids loved the skulls and the creepiness. But each kit comes with the animal skulls, the information on the animals, reproducibles, and even ideas of activities that you can do with the children. So we were able to do a really fun activity. The kids loved it. And I think the parents really enjoyed it because they felt like their kids were learning something, but still having fun. And again, no cost to the library. We were able to check it out and spend some time with it and get to come up with the best program for our area. Next slide, please. This was my favorite event. This is Riley Donovan, and she's a 12-year-old entrepreneur who has her own business, animal business in the area, and she knows her animals. She brought some really cool things for the kids to hold, and she talked about them. She had boa constrictors and rabbits, even baby rabbits. miniature chickens, and even a chinchilla. And she talked about each one. She was really educated about them. And I think the thing that was so nice about this was that the kids were able to relate to somebody that looked like them. She was young. They could see that if you have a drive and you want to do something, if you do the work, you can do it. And so it was really fun to have someone that the kids could relate to. Next slide, please. So in closing, I'm sure that we have all learned new things during these stressful times. I learned many things, but 3 that really stood out was that we really should be looking at our surrounding libraries as assets. We don't have to be competitors. If you look at what they're doing, you can base your things that you do and make your community more rounded, more beneficial to everybody in the area. We don't have to be competitors. And the second thing I learned was do one thing really well. It's more important to do something that you're going to get the most out of your time for, that the patrons are going to get the most information on quality product out of, and it's just important to do one thing than try to do too many things that you're not putting together well. And then the last thing that I learned is that you can offer quality programs at little or no cost if you have the community support and you do some creative exploring. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm sure that my information is there and you can send them to me or ask them in chat. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So our last session was from Azita Federelli, but Azita is unable to join us this afternoon, but her slides will be available. So you'll be able to see her slides, and possibly we'll have something later with Azita. Thank you to Amber, to Carrie, and to Lisa, the presenters, for this administration panel number 4. This wraps up the last panel for today, Leading Big in Small Places. This is the second time we've provided this online conference, and we're thrilled that we have so many participants joining us from all over the country. Thank you, everyone. The Q&A with Kelly.
Well, we do have a few questions. Amber and Carrie were really quick about answering questions as soon as people could ask them. So they were either answering them in their presentation or answering them in the chat as people were sending them. But there was a lot of interest in signage. And I know that's I feel a little bit like Wizard of Oz. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Don't look at my office behind me. But I am a huge weeder and declutterer, as not in evidence today. But how do you decide how much signage is too much? Or if it were up to me, we'd have no signs in the library. So you don't want to ask me. But how do you balance that with staff who wants to put signs everywhere?
Well, I mean, part of that is too many signs and everybody's just going to ignore what they say anyways. They're going to ignore the important signs about your closing hours if you're cluttering it up with your programs or whatnot, depending on where you put your signs. But the paper that I posted that we shared the link to actually has a formula to look at how many signs you have versus your library square footage, I think it is.
Okay. Okay, great. And Carrie kind of goes along with it, is that there was a lot of interest in the chat about weeding. It seems we're all weeders at heart, which is kind of nice. I'm not alone.
I love it. I love to get rid of it. Like, seriously, here, I will weed more. Don't ever come to my house because it's completely opposite. But yeah, and the people, like our patrons, come in and they really comment how much cleaner it looks, almost like it's like I said before, it's a lot easier for them to find things. It's a lot easier for us to find things too. Yeah, like I've had, like I said, I had some people are like, oh, your shelves are too empty, and others are like, this is great. And I did notice there was a lot of chat about travel books, and that was one of the first things I pulled, was tons of just terrible travel books.
I think one of the best things for me that you said that makes it easier for staff to understand is that if you bring 600 books in, you need to send 600 books out. And maybe not exact correlation, but you do have to have space. And Shannon mentioned in the chat that it should be an ongoing process.
Yes.
So those were all really great things in there. And then for Lisa, great response to your nature kits. Were those mostly adult themed, or were you sending out some to kids as well with the binoculars and all in there?
Well, we had a high school student that was one of the participants that was really excited because she was actually taking a photography class at school, but mostly adults, yes.
Okay. And then a couple of things that you mentioned that were asked about, and I didn't see your link slide at the end. So you mentioned censusreporter.org, which is a fabulous tool. So is that linked in your slides? And if not, okay. Okay, good.
I think.
All right. And then your volunteer, your 12-year-old, do you, because they're not an actual presenter and you're letting people hold things, did you have to do anything special for that? Someone asked that one.
No. And we didn't let anyone just hold them without their parents' permission. Everybody that was here for that presentation had their parents here and available.
Okay. And then this is for Shannon or Kristen. And Shannon put a link to MSU in the chat about their kits. But we've talked a lot in our presentations on this side of the room about MSU extension. Do people who are outside of Michigan understand what MSU extension is? And is there a correlation in other states? Because, you know, we utilize it a lot, but I got thinking that maybe other states don't understand what that is.
Yeah, so I'm assuming all states have a land grant university. I don't know one that wouldn't. So your land grant university will be the home to your state's extension service. And then usually, sometimes people tend to think it's all agricultural related, but it may depend on what services are coming from your particular ag university there in your state. But here in Michigan, we have a lot more than agricultural related. We have wellness, we have legal resources, we have mental health training, and the state library here in Michigan actually partners with the Extension Service to help libraries complement and support programming that they can provide out to their communities. So we try to keep a really close relationship with the MSU, Michigan State University Extension Service. So if you are in another state, I would definitely just wander around their extension website and then make some contacts there to see what you may be able to offer through your public library to your patrons and residents of your community. Usually, I bet they would be thrilled to know that a library would be interested in marketing or telling more residents in the community about the extension services, because there's only so much they can do for their own marketing and PR, just like yourselves. There's only so much you can do. And in Michigan, we really like to try to make sure that libraries don't believe they have to do everything. I mean, like Lisa talked about in her program, you can't do everything. So it's really good to collaborate and connect, reuse, and we often try to make sure libraries understand what other organizations have available. So during the pandemic, on our Plowed website, which are websites we provide to small and rural libraries here in Michigan, we actually integrated links to MSU extension virtual programs on those Plowed sites. So the libraries already had those available and could talk to their community members about them, make sure that they were linked on the website automatically. They didn't have to do any updates. MSU extension had virtual, what was it called? When kids go on a virtual field trips, that's what the word. So the extension service provided virtual field trips. And then we also have a service called Get Set Up that provides virtual online programming for older adults. And that's available at no cost. And so public libraries in Michigan can push that information out into their communities, and then they don't have to in turn duplicate everything that's already available by Get Set Up or already available through extension service, which is a great saver of time, money, staff resources, especially in a small library.
And then one quick question for Kristen. We've had a lot of great resources linked in the chat. Shannon sent lots of stuff. Kathy Lancaster sent some stuff. You sent some stuff. Is that all going to be included in what's sent out to everyone?
Oh, I wasn't going to, but if it's helpful, we can certainly do that.
I know I'm trying to write furiously sometimes with some of the links.
What you can do
So it's helpful to.
is you can click the 3 dots at the bottom of your chat window and you'll get the option to save the chat. And that will save a copy automatically to wherever Zoom saves stuff on your hard drive. And then you can have a copy much faster.
Okay.
Than I can probably get to it.
Okay. Thank you. And that's all.
That sounds great. I just want to piggyback on the MSU extension and Shannon's conversation to say that for those of you who have stagnant budgets, I think sometimes that idea, like everybody in your town is trying to get to the same families in the case of youth services, anytime you can have one event that you do part of and another agency does part of, it's going to cost you less money, but you're still going to get that large group of people. And sometimes you can even make it a better event than either of you could have had alone. And I'd love to see more of that as some things stay online as we emerge from pandemic life, that if you've got an author at your school or at your library, can another library also have the link to share with their patrons? I know Cindy talked about that in her presentation last hour. And I've gone to events of Cindy's because she has shared them back out at us. All right.
Do we have any questions from attendees that we haven't taken care of in chat, or anything else that you have a question about?
All right. In that case, Shannon, I think we're going to wrap it up. So on behalf of all of the presenters and the Library of Michigan and the U of M School of Information, we want to thank IMLS's LSTA funds for making this possible today. And we thank all of you for your goodwill and for cheering on presenters, both those who have many presentations under their belt and those for whom this was a big career goal stretch. So we've already posted links to the slides on the event page. And once Shannon and I download all of the archive materials, and I'll do a few little edits, we'll post those as well. And we'll follow up with with an email to everyone who registered. So with that, we invite the cohort to stay on for a few minutes, and everyone else, enjoy your day and keep fighting the good fight in small and rural libraries. Thanks, everybody.